Welcome to Diary of a CIO. My name is Sam Ebrahim. I'm the Executive General Manager for New South Wales for Truku, a national recruitment business. The purpose behind this podcast is after close to 20 years in the industry, speaking to numerous CIOs, all I ever heard was around the technology, transformation, agile versus waterfall, but there was not enough content out there about the story behind the title. So the purpose of this podcast is to really tell the story of some interesting CIOs from across Australia. With that in mind, I want to welcome my first interstate guest to the podcast. So this is Leigh Williams. So welcome to the show. Just a quick introduction to yourself would be really appreciated to start the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So Leigh Williams, I'm the CIO for Brisbane Catholic Education. So we oversee all of the education for Catholic schools in Queensland across a particular area of the different regions. So about 13,000 staff, got 146 schools, so about 150 sites in total. And we also support Cairns Diocese as well, which is about another 30 schools up in far north Queensland as well.
Wow,
so it keeps me busy.
And thank you for making the journey down to cold New South Wales today.
Oh, it's beautiful. Sunny day today, so it's nice.
And I think what common theme in the podcast I've done is what is perceived by many as a typical route to becoming a CIO, which is generally that linear journey up the ladder into becoming the head of technology. Like many of my guests, that's not the story behind you. So tell the listeners here, how did your career start? Where did you begin?
Yeah, good question. So started out in education and psychology and always knew that I had a passion around working with others and supporting them in their growth and learning journey, whatever that looked like. When I came into education, I was teaching IT and biology. So I did always have that background there. But then started leaning more into the IT realm and leaning more towards, well, what can technology do for us in education and how can it drive forward at a system level, not just for an individual child, but for an entire school, an entire group of schools or an organisation of schools, and being able to drive forward change, but also just support our children and our next generation. It's always been at the heart and core of everything I've done. So that's where I started out. So
you started in psychology, and then you were actually teaching within the education system.
Yes.
What for you was the eureka moment where you thought, I want to actually go into the actual technology function within education? What was that actual moment?
Yeah, so it was working with students directly, and I could see different things that they were trying to do, and they were utilising products that at that time were really built for a corporate environment. I think a lot of vendors at that time were not even considering education as a marketplace for them to play in.
Yep.
And it was quite frustrating as a teacher, but also as a student as well, the different things that they wanted to do. They wanted to explore and be creative and break boundaries. And I wanted to be able to do that for them, but still in a safe and secure way where I knew that they were still protected with the right guardrails around them. And so you could see that there was a real gap there in technology of how do we bring these big technology vendors into the education marketplace and say, hey, these are actual not only a potential whole customer base for you, but these are going to be the next workforce in the next generation. So how do we get them engaged and build their digital literacy now to help you when they're in their workforce in the future, but also they can be the next designers, the next creators, the next innovators of our generation. So how do we work best with them for them to be able to do that where technology is not an inhibitor for them?
Yeah. I think taking advantage of the younger generation with their inquisitive mindsets and wanting to learn and develop as well is key. Why do you think initially there was a reluctance for vendors or technology to be in the actual education market or education space?
Yeah, I think that initially it was I wouldn't say dollars didn't come into it because, most education organisations in Australia are government owned or government funded. So there is a limitation to what we can do, but that actually breeds more creativity. So to me, it was actually working with vendors to say 80% of what you're doing is applicable to us, but it's actually only this 20% that you need to just adjust or change or work out how this is going to suit not just a 15-year-old child in a classroom, but what about a 10-year-old child? What about a 5-year-old child? How do we actually work with the technology with students at all ages so that they can keep learning on their journey and the technology is enabling them, not being that blocker, but actually even supporting them to grow further than what we even thought that they could?
Yeah. And thinking back to my education, which was many years ago now, I think the technology didn't play a major part in it, but the landscape's changed a lot.
Absolutely.
In terms of, I suppose, rate of technology adoption within the education sector, during your career, both, I suppose, within what you class as the business side of education, but then also the corporate and technology side, how have you seen that pace change over the last kind of 20 years or so?
Significantly, absolutely. So definitely from in the 90s and even the early 2000s, technology was more seen as, just word processing. It was seen as very basic functions in education and or seen as an administrative task for either teachers or other admin staff in schools. Then, particularly when social media platforms started coming into play, and then, you had your smart technology starting to come in, the very first iPhone comes out, and you're starting to hit the teens of the 2000s. That was absolutely the game changer, that people realised that you didn't have to be an adult to actually, or have a computer degree to start using computers. And we could see that students who had no coding background, no history of computers, could actually get in and start manipulating both the front end and the back end of products and doing it quite sophisticatedly, because they didn't have some of the barrier blockers that we've built up as adults over time. They weren't risk averse. They were definitely risk takers, as we know teenagers are in all walks of life. So they were happy to do that also in the digital realm as well. And so it became a very quick turnaround to realise, education is actually a space where we should be investing time and effort and money into technology to help build them up and what is possible for then what can be delivered in our schools every single day.
Yeah. And you've got a really interesting background, as you said before, where I think your guiding star over the years has been really around progression and also innovation as well. How do you bring that passion to work every day and drive, I suppose, breaking down those barriers and bringing, I suppose, technology and that mindset into the education environment?
Absolutely. For me, my moral imperative has always been students at the heart and students at the core. So in terms of what gets me out of bed every morning is knowing that I can do something that will actually make a difference to a child or a whole system of students and make a difference to their growth, their development, their ability to do what they need to do every single day. So that's what gets me out of bed every morning and motivates me intrinsically. In terms of what I show up and how I show up in the workplace, is then being able to create that winnable narrative to others in the organisation as well, to say, why are we doing this? What's the heart of what we're trying to do here? Because sometimes there are challenging days where you're stuck with a really wicked problem that you're trying to solve and you're trying to work it out, and it could be so easy to just put it in a box and put it to the side and say, too hard, we're not going to work on this. But then when you walk into a school, you walk into a classroom and you see, if we can solve that problem, here's the child where it's going to make a difference. Here's the child where they want to be able to do this thing that they're trying to do, but maybe because of accessibility reasons or different learning needs that they have, they can't. And if they had a technology assistant beside them, they would actually be able to do this, and they would be able to do all the things that all the other students are doing in the class so easily. And so that's those sort of things that keep me motivated.
Yeah, and I think it's some of my guests in this podcast as well. It's the purpose-driven mindset where your end stakeholders or the benefits of your work aren't necessarily dividends for shareholders or execs, but it's actually the real world kind of children in your education system that benefit from that as well.
Absolutely.
What have you seen, I suppose, some of the biggest changes in technology and how that's applied in the education or the classroom over the last kind of years or so?
Oh, I mean, AI, like everywhere, has just exploded into the market, and education is not immune to that.
Yep.
I mean, we saw the prevalence of that in the background of people. What was more nuanced is definitely in our social media platforms, and understanding that students at a very young age are now getting into social media and what the algorithms behind social media are doing or influencing children, both for good and potentially for bad. So how do we work with those big social media giants to make sure that what they're doing is not only safe but ethical as well, that if you're creating an algorithm that's for a 13-year-old male, what should you be doing? What should you be creating? What shouldn't you be creating as well, or allowing through your platforms? That to me was the precursor to then what then started the wave of AI that then became more generative AI that we see today within education. So now the explosion is there's just so many possibilities. Really, as someone who's leading technology, it's more I can't get in the way of it or say this product or not this product because there's just so many out there.
Yeah.
It's what are the guardrails I can put in place. So at least if you want to run, I'm going to let you run. Can you just stay within these lanes?
Yeah.
And then you can go as fast and be as creative as you want to be within that.
And we'll touch on the AI piece later in the podcast, which is a really interesting piece of your role and the work you're doing in your current organisation as well. I suppose going back to the guide rails side of things, I think you see a lot of schools where they're trying to separate students from technology because it's a distraction, not taking phones away during class time. How do you, I suppose, understand and define when technology is good for education and when technology maybe is a distraction?
Yeah, to me, that question is more directed at an individual teacher as well, because that really depends on what the lesson is and what the purpose is of the lesson or curriculum that they're trying to teach and work to, because there are so many cases where technology is not only a really good tool in the classroom, it is the best tool in the classroom. So, if you're using particularly more latest technology around augmented reality and other pieces of technology like that, where it's, let's just, getting out a textbook and studying Greece or ancient Greece, as opposed to being able to go on a website and be a bit more immersive in what you might be seeing of what ancient Greece looked like and how they lived and interacted, or even connecting with a school over there to actually talk to students and talk to people who live there. And now with augmented reality, it's that you could actually walk through ancient Greece like as if you were there 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So the learning experience has just exploded in terms of what the possibilities are for student learning and student engagement as well, because if students are engaged, they're learning. And what we see still is that there are these age brackets where students become disengaged. So anything we can get them back to get engaged in their learning, immersed in their learning, that's going to help them on to continue within schools and not end up, dropping out or going on other pathways. So there are definitely so many times where technology is not just a tool, but it's the tool and it's the best tool to actually use. And then, of course, there are other times where it's still, it is still a great thing for students to get out in the playground and run and exercise. And so I'm certainly not saying take any of that away, because that is still also equally important, is looking after your physical self and making sure that you're healthy, you're active, and, that there's also that element to education as well. Can technology play a part in that? Of course it can, and we see that already where we see students, videoing themselves who might be studying and wanting to become an elite athlete, or they want to be the entourage that sits around an elite athlete if they want to get into allied health. And so they might film themselves doing a particular task and then analyse it and utilise technology to help analyse what they're doing and how they could perform better or have the athlete perform better based on technology products that they then plug into to say, oh, they didn't bend their leg quite right this way, or they need to do this faster or slower, or, whatever the case might be.
And that's, I think, the student side of technology, obviously there's a lot of benefit there. What about from the teacher side? I think as I said, growing up in my education, I think there was a education plan that everyone adhered to. Students have different strengths and weaknesses. They develop at different speeds as well. So is there technology on the teaching side that enables curriculums and teaching methods to be targeted towards a classroom with individual kind of, I suppose, pace and curricular sets?
Absolutely. And that's, again, where AI has significantly helped in this space, because technology had a part to play, firstly, in the data analysis of looking at where students are and being able to harvest a whole lot of data and present it in a way that's palatable to a teacher. So again, a teacher's not expected to be a data scientist, but they can actually read the data in an easy, palatable way that they can then say, yep, so I know that this group of students, they're ready for this level of learning. These students are ready for this and these students are ready for this, and being able to group out students. What we're now seeing with AI and the ability is not just to have groups of students, but to go from personalisation to hyper-personalisation, where it's if there's 25 students in the class, every one of those 25 students might have a slightly different personalised plan based on exactly where they are at that day as well. So just the real-time effects of knowing exactly where all 25 students are at all times of the day has never been able to be done before. Like you couldn't expect one human teacher to be able to do that on a daily basis for all 25 students.
Yeah.
But now with technology, that's actually possible.
And there's some really interesting work that Brisbane Catholic Education is doing at the moment. Can you share some information and details around what's happening there?
Absolutely, yeah. So we started on our AI journey like many did when it started to explode onto the market. But in the background, we'd actually been doing a lot of work for the last few years around data security, data privacy, and also data integration as well. So that put us in a really good stance when Gen AI just blew out onto the market. We were in a good position to keep moving forward. And so we ran some early pilots, and then from there that were quite successful. We have now rolled out a full Copilot M365 experience for all our staff. So we've got just over 13,000 staff, and we're rolling out to them now. So we're the first education organisation in the world to be doing that with a generative AI tool, and going beyond pilot to scale, essentially. So we're leading in that sense in terms of rollout. It's come with amazing opportunities and benefits. Firstly, workload reduction for teachers. We are seeing anywhere from 3 hours, 6 hours to 9 hours a week saved in their administrative tasks, curriculum planning, and other, administrative type roles that they're doing, or data analysis that they're doing. And when you think about it in the teaching landscape, if they can save up to a day a week of admin, then that's a day or extra a week that they're doing actually what they got into teaching for, which is being with students, helping them learn, helping with their learning and well-being. Yep. So if we can free up their time so they're spending more time doing that, that benefits everyone, benefits, of course, the student, but even teachers themselves in their own well-being. The number of teachers we've had come back and say, oh my gosh, I'm not going home at 9 o'clock at night anymore, or I'm not going home to then be with my family for a couple of hours, but then sit back at my laptop and do another couple of hours of work before I go to bed. So their own well-being is actually being improved as well. So we're seeing lots of benefits around that. And then, like I mentioned before, around the capability of hyper-personalisation, we're still, delving more into what that can mean and what that could look like into the future. And then probably the other area that we've gone down is around creating individualised chatbots. And we know a lot of different organisations are already doing this as well, around creating a purpose-built chatbot that will be able to deliver really specific outcomes. Yep. So it might be that we have a chatbot that's designed to tutor students in Year 11 and 12 physics. That's all it does. That's all it's designed to do. And that's what a student and or a teacher can be logging into that chatbot to help them with developing their physics and physics understanding at a Year 11 and 12 level. So we're seeing more and more cases like that. And again, like I talked before about the guardrails, that helps create an environment that's safe, still creative, still using technology, but has the parameters around it that it's not going out into the wild of the internet to find out answers about physics that may or may not be correct.
Yeah. How did you become the first schooling system in the world? That's quite a accolade to be able to share.
Yeah, so there was a lot of things that came into play. So I'd love to say there was a silver bullet. There wasn't a silver bullet. But as I said, it was on the backing of doing some great work around our security and data for the last previous years. Then there was a lot of conversations with our executive and our board as well, not just one-off, I'm coming and I want to do AI and expecting that they're going to say yes, but lots of conversations on what are you hearing, what are you worried about, what are your concerns, what are your questions, and then going away and helping to create pilots or answers to those questions, equally going out to our schools and asking principals the same thing. If we rolled out AI, what would you be worried about? What do you hope out of AI? What are the ethics that you would want to see put into AI? And had a lot of conversations. Then from that, we developed a number of different pilots in a group of schools that we knew were ready and they were the innovators in this space and wanting to run with it. Then from the success of those pilots created momentum, because now we had not just data, but it was our own data. It was our own schools saying, this is what's possible. This is what we did. It's not a case study from another country. It's a case study here within our own schools. that, of course, then gave more credibility when I came back to the board again and said, well, here's our schools doing it now. Yep. This is what we think we can do. This is how we think we can scale it out. Pair it with a really good change management approach, because it's not just about the technology. Technology is one element. There's also people and there's processes. So how are we going to manage the people and processes and policies? This is how we think we can do it. A really solid change management approach, so that it got to the point after this, we went over probably about a 12-month period, so that we got to a point where I'd say it would be difficult for them to say no. So that was certainly a massive part of it. Yeah. The other element that we worked on early on was we knew that the Vatican, being a Catholic organisation, of course, we do sit under our Pope, and now Pope Leo, but at the time it was Pope Francis. And he had brought together in the Vatican all of the big tech giants at the start of when Gen AI really exploded, and said, we need to look at AI ethically. And they built a shared model of AI ethics and a framework around that. Then they put out a call, what they called the Rome call, to organisations globally, and said, become an ambassador. Here are what we are saying are the ethical principles around transparency, inclusivity, privacy, security, and building out all of those layers and saying, what can you do as an organisation so that you build AI with ethics by design, not as an afterthought? So we signed up to the Rome call, and because we were early adopters in this space, and said, absolutely, we want to jump on board with this. Can we become ambassadors? Which they agreed to. And so we actually became the first education organisation in the world to become the Rome call, or the Vatican ambassadors for AI in this space.
What an amazing story.
Yes.
I think some really good advice there for listeners who are in their own industries where they're struggling to understand or sell the value of AI. So I think the advice you've given there is around, I suppose, understanding the business problems, building some good case studies, and going through not just the technology piece, but also the change in process piece as well. And also being a Vatican-supported technology initiative. I've never heard that before, so that's a really interesting story there. Was there any really, I suppose, in terms of getting AI adopted into what historically was a very non-tech environment, was there any significant obstacles or challenges you came up against that you could share with the listeners here and give them a sort of advice if they come up with them themselves as well?
Yeah, so, and there's still challenges. There's always going to be, because one of the opportunities of AI, but also the challenges of AI, is the rate that it evolves. Yeah. And so once you think you've got it and you've nailed it, it will evolve again. And so you've always got to be actively learning and listening to what's coming next. Listen to the futurists, listen to the trend makers, and actually say, could this actually come to my industry, and mine being education? If this did come to education, what would it look like? What do we think it would look like, and how might it impact us? And how do we get ready for this and get on the forefront of it? And that has helped us significantly, because most of those times we've had those conversations, it has then come to reality. Yeah. So even things around that we now see around, you see this play out in social media as well, around deep fakes, hallucinations, even from AI itself, of giving you the wrong answer, bias be created towards different parts of our society or different ethnic groups as well. How do we manage that? How do we control it where we can? But then also, how do we educate as well, and make sure that people have a more discerning view when they're using AI? What is it spitting back to me, and does the AI itself have any biases that it's bringing to the table, just like any human would? So those challenges are always ongoing, and those challenges are always evolving. But I'd say it's more getting out in front of it. Don't sit back and wait for it to come to your organisation or wait for it to come to your industry. Because if you do, you're already going to be behind the eight ball. It's already going to then be a game of being reactive as opposed to proactive. And sometimes the damage can already be done. So then you're facing a longer challenge to get back ahead of it again. Yeah.
And you shared I think in terms of the real world impact of technology, you shared a story with me previously around a student in Queensland who built a technology tool for the glasses product. Are you able to share that with the listeners? Because that was a fascinating story.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our students, Kobe, shout out, he was are really interested in augmented reality and where that could go. And so it was just prior to the release of the Apple Vision Pro, the Apple Vision glasses. And he was already dabbling in that space and doing some app development work in his school. And anyway, so when he knew the technology was coming with Apple, he got in early to be able to get into their coding space. And he actually designed an entire app for his school that was around safety in the workplace. And for him, that was his school, and particularly the woodworking lab, that type of environment. So when you walk into the woodwork room, what are the safety features you've got to look for? If you want to make a table, for instance, what are all the pieces of the table that you need to think about, all the screws and bolts, the size of the wood, what type of wood, and it talked you through all of that. Now, the amazing thing is that he built a working prototype without having an Apple Vision Pro himself. So he built the entire app. And the reason that we found out about it is because we heard that the one thing he couldn't test is because with Apple Vision Pro, your hand movements and gestures can make things move and change.
Yeah.
And he couldn't test that. He'd built it. He thought it would work. So we said, we can't have this. So we got hold of Apple and said, look, you've got to get an Apple Vision Pro to this child. And so they were great. They literally drove one up there. He's on the Sunshine Coast, drove one up there the next day. We were going up the following day, and he spent 24 hours nonstop. I don't think he even slept that night, testing and retesting and rebuilding, so that within 24 hours when we went and saw him, it was a fully working prototype of an app that he has now, of course, put his own IP around and everything.
Sure.
And what's amazing is that, he's gone on to go into, and that school in particular as well, they're doing amazing things in technology, have gone on to the Worldwide Developers Conference competition that Apple run each year. Now, this global conference is for students all around the world to compete in developing different products that could be bought and sold or utilised in the App Store. And when I say students, I don't just mean school students. These can be university level students who might be doing, information technology degrees, and a lot of them are, who actually compete in this competition. And then, we found out just a short while ago that he's actually one of the winners of this global competition. And so it just shows what is actually possible. And this student is still at school, and this is what he's been able to achieve. So imagine what he's going to be like by the time he graduates, which is still another year and a half away for him. And so, he's, I'm sure, already getting job offers, but he is going to stay in school.
A bright future ahead for
that. But
he
has a bright future ahead. But that's where it just shows that with some technology paired with creativity, a great teacher as well behind him as well, supporting him and allowing for that creativity to just flourish and grow, the sky's the limit. And it's not that we have to wait for students to graduate to start their work and start their career. We see examples like this all the time of students building things and solving things in the local context of their own school that could end up being commercial products, sold out globally.
Yeah, I think that's clear evidence of the actual real world outcomes of the hard work that you and your peers do in the education sector with technology as well. So that's an amazing story. Another one of your passions is around diversity. And you've spent a lot of your career in terms of being a coach and mentor to the next generation of female leaders coming through. Could you share some information around that and why that's so important to you?
Yeah, definitely. So early on in my career and throughout almost all of my career, I've not had a female leader, and so it's only recently that I do now again. So it's really showed me throughout my career, and looking back in hindsight, what was missing at certain points of my career where I might there was certain points where I literally had a male leader, all male colleagues, and had males reporting to me as well. So in a 360-degree view, I was the lone female, even maybe called the token female as well. So, it meant that at the time I just didn't have any other female role models that I could look to or talk to or look up to or see what's possible. And so now that I am in, an executive level position, I want to make sure that our next generation of future leaders that are coming through in their 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever that might be for them, that they do have different female role models and that they can, either in a group setting or confidentially be able to have real world conversations on what they're doing, what they're struggling with, what they're seeing in their own workforce. Because in the IT industry, and I know would have heard it before, like it is still a male-dominated industry, and it becomes even more male-dominated the further up the leadership chain that you get. In terms of CIOs across Australia, I think the stats are still only about 8% are females. And then across IT industry as a whole, we're about 27, 28%.
Yeah.
So there's still so much work there to do to have just a more gender balanced industry, but particularly at those senior leadership roles. So it's been a long running passion of mine to have to build up other women in leadership and be able to see them grow in it. And I love seeing them then grow on their own education, their own leadership journey, and see where the places that they end up. It's just incredible. So,
and what's the process that you go through? If people on this listen to the podcast and want to understand how to find a mentor, but also how to find the right mentor for them, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, reach out to different organisations. If you're not in an organisation that's big enough to have some type of internal program, firstly, maybe you could suggest one internally and set one up. Because, I always think if you're going to talk the talk, you've got to walk the walk as well. But otherwise, there are organisations out there like Women in Digital is a great organisation that runs nationally, and they have mentoring programs. So does Women in Technology is another one. And in those organisations, I've been a mentor for those organisations where I've been paired with different mentees. And like you said, it is about finding that right fit for both parties, for both the mentor and the person being mentored, that there is a nice fit, because you do create quite a close relationship in terms of what journey they're on, how you can help and support them, and times where you're actually just the guide on the side. You're more just asking coaching type questions where certainly as a mentor, I don't see that I have all the answers. I certainly don't. But it's about asking the right questions to help guide them in their own journey and also just get to a point where they know what their worth is. They can be confident in what's right and what's wrong, and also have the confidence that if they do need to stand up to something, that they can stand up to it, and knowing that they're going to have someone that's got their back. Because that's quite often some part of the challenge is that they can feel alone in what they're doing. And sometimes in, some of the young women that I've worked with and mentored, they literally have been the lone woman with no other women in the whole organisation or in the whole technology department. So it can become quite isolating. So knowing that there is other support networks out there that are great, that are credible, that have been around for many years and run great programs.
Yeah, and you shared a story with me about your own daughter that shared a. You comfortable sharing that story?
Yeah, I can. So it really gives testament to where the gender divide is and where the gender bias is, where whether you call it out or it's nuanced and just part of the fabric of where you work. So my daughter at the time, she was only about 5 or 6 years old, and she'd come into my office in the afternoon. I'm pretty sure it was just at the end of school holidays, and my mother, her grandmother, was bringing her in the afternoon so that I could then take her home, and was just finishing up work. And so she came in and she was all excited, and so I said, let's go for a walk around the office, and went into another office, and I said, this is Mark, he's my boss, and introduced her, and it was all very lovely. And then took her to another room, and I said, and this is David, he's like the big boss, he runs everything, and then went around and introduced her to a few other people and said, this is Mandy, and this is what she does, and she does this and that. And anyway, we got back to my office, and I sat down with her, and I had showed her some people that I work with and who report to me, and she turned to me and she goes, Mum, she said, that was great, thank you so much for doing that. And I said, that's really good. And she said, can I ask something? And I said, yeah, what's wrong? And she goes, can only men be bosses? And it just floored me when she said it, that a child so young had picked up on my office tour. I'd introduced our bosses, which were male, and my boss and my boss's boss were male, and the other people I'd introduced her to that reported to me were females. And so she understood that at her age as the bosses are the males and the other workers are the females. So to see that bias play out and see it through the lens of a child that age, I will never forget that moment of, yeah, you're right, and that needs to change. And for my daughter, she's now 14, and I want to see that she has great female role models in whatever career that she chooses, and that she sees, amazing, powerful, dynamic women around her and knows that the sky's the limit for whatever she wants to do.
Is that one of your drivers and motivations? Is that kind of that moment there? Is what kind of drives you with your mentorship
absolutely.
and giving time to others?
Absolutely. It definitely what drove me, and even in our home life from there, that, I would start to talk to her even at the dinner table of just famous women and just talking about other women leaders in general, whether, when we got our first female prime minister, when Julie Gillard was appointed, and just talking about those moments in history and what that change that meant and what change that made, and the impact of that and the gravitas of that, with other countries that have actually still never had a female president or prime minister, so just talking to her about those, that's, one of the most senior leader roles, but in different industries and organisations, and just highlighting, oh, look, isn't it great that that organisation, their CEO is actually a woman, or their leadership team actually has a good gender split, that they are about 50-50 in terms of males and females. So, just her being able to see that, knows that that's just possible for her. And I can definitely say when I was younger and when I was at school, I did not see any of that. It wasn't even talked about. And in fact, if anything, probably one of the other, when in hindsight now, I can say it's a defining moment, but at the time I didn't see it as that. But when I was in year 11, and our year 11 careers coordinator brought all the girls together, I was in a co-ed school, brought all the girls together and said, right, young ladies, you're getting to that age where you're going to have to think about what you're going to do post-school. So I think the choices that you do have is that you can be a receptionist, you can be a stay-at-home mum, you can work in retail, or if you think you're really smart, be a teacher.
That's crazy.
That was the advice that was given to me when I was in year 11. Let alone the fact that he'd called all the females together and that was the story. And I won't repeat the story of what he said to the males, but I know it was a very, very different story with lots and lots of opportunities that they had for their careers.
Yeah.
But that's what was and when that's spoken to you and that's spoken over you as a child, those things do play out, or that you start to believe that actually, and don't get me wrong, all of those 4 options are all very honourable options, but they aren't the only 4, and they aren't the only 4 for a whole cohort of women that are sitting there.
Thankfully, we live in very different times now. What's your view of STEM and the value of D, E, and I in the STEM? We've talked about this before. What's your viewpoint?
This is where diversity and equity and inclusion needs to come into play, and it has such opportunity because there's so many different STEM career pathways and opportunities within a school environment, but beyond that into a career as well. And so if there's different ways that we can incorporate more diversity and equity into those fields, I think it's going to pay absolute dividends in terms of what's actually possible and what's achievable. And if you've got a science problem that you're working on and trying to solve it, just like if you're working on a technology problem, having a diversity of voices in the room is going to be better than having 10 voices that are all the same.
Yeah.
And so the more diversity that you're bringing in, the better outcome that you're actually going to achieve. So I think there's so many opportunities and possibilities there. So I do think there's many different ways that we can look at diversity and equity and inclusion in different areas of whether it be STEM or whether it even be in the arts, whatever it is. I think we've got to look at how are we genuinely making gains in this, not just paying lip service to it.
And I think the D in DE&I is always a bigger focus for a lot of companies when the E and the I are sometimes an afterthought, but having I suppose a diverse group of individuals and organisation where they don't feel safe or included, that they can share their opinions is kind of defeating the point as well. What's your advice in terms of organisations or teams or environments where you've got a diverse group of people? How do you make them all feel equal and included as well? What's your advice to people listening on the call?
Yeah, well, I think there's as well a nuance there between equality and equity as well, and being really clear about that, because we aren't all the same. We aren't all cookie cutters. that we do bring this diverse skill set, and that means that we need to think about equity. And so what are the different skill sets that everyone does bring? And that can come from their life experience as well, of where their background might be. If they've, lived half their life in another country and then come to Australia and start working in our organisation, that's an amazing life experience that maybe other people in the organisation haven't had, or they've seen things in a completely different realm under a completely different government structure or organisation, where they can bring that learning and bring that information in that we can, build from that. So I think celebrating that, of not saying, well, you've come into our organisations, this is how we do things, but tell us about it and invite the conversation in. So I think being invitational is always a great step forward, of saying, you've had this amazing background, I'd love to hear more, or you've told me about your amazing background, would you be willing to share that with others? And inviting that conversation, because I think sometimes people might even want to share, but they don't feel confident to even ask. So I think having that invitation to share, and firstly maybe in one-on-one context, but then inviting them to share more broadly, can help start that diversity conversation and build up that understanding of the different skills that everyone brings and experiences. I think another one is coming back to, if you want to see the change, you've got to be the change as well. So actually look at, what could I initiate in my own organisation? So an example that we've done within the IT, within our IT group, within our organisation, is that we were building out our reconciliation action plan, or our RAP. And, that has to be approved by Reconciliation Action Australia. And that was a big part of our work. And so we said, what? One of the things that we've done before that we think we could do as part of this RAP is be able to bring in some traineeships, and they would be First Nations students that they've graduated from our schools and come in and have a First Nations traineeship. Because I talked about the stats before about women in IT. The stats are, of course, significantly lower when we talk about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that work in IT. It is, it's almost 0%. It is so low. And so how do we help support diversity in thinking and doing, just even in IT? So we were able to get that across the line. And so myself and a few other team members got together and said, okay, what would a traineeship look like? And we built up this great 2-year plan, where the first year, the trainees, and we ended up with 2 of them in the first instance, that they spent a couple of months with different parts of the IT teams, so they could get a breadth of understanding of, you might think IT is this, but have you seen this part of an organisation and this part and this part? Then in the second year, they choose their speciality of, okay, everything you've seen, now let's look at specialising you in that for a whole year. We partnered with TAFE as well, so that they would be able to get multiple certificates in information technology or cybersecurity, or a field of IT that they're choosing, so that they would walk out not with just a traineeship, but with qualifications as well. It has proven so successful that one of our trainees ended up finishing up a little bit early because they had so many job offers they ended up, and they've gone off on a career in IT and around change management. The other trainee, because she has done so amazingly well, we have employed her. And so she is now officially one of our staff members. That's amazing. Now we've got a new wave of trainees that we've got preparing to come through as well. So I think even putting those sort of practices in place and saying, well, what could I do if I want to see the change? How do I be the change? And how do I start to bring in programs like that? There's what's stopping me, really, because sometimes you think, oh, maybe it's the people and culture team should be running that, or this team should be running that. But it's actually, no, I can actually set this up. No, what's stopping me? So,
It's a great example of taking ownership and accountability, and then at the end of it, seeing amazing outcomes that benefit the next generation of people coming through the leadership channel.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. It's been a really insightful and enjoyable conversation with Leigh, talking around her journey into her current role, her really strong purpose around education, which is driven by helping the next generation of students coming through, with some real world examples of the benefits of her great work in her current role in previous organisations as well. And then we talked around the value of DE&I, Leigh's background and the challenges that she encountered growing up, but then also the impact that she's having with the initiatives that she runs in her current organisation as well. So coming towards the end of this podcast, as with all of my guests, I want to ask you one question, which is, what is the one bit of advice you would wish you could have given yourself earlier in your career?
I would say back yourself.
Okay.
Have the confidence, know your worth, and actually just go after it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. As always, please like, comment and share, and stay tuned for more content moving forward. Thank you.